What's going on, guys? Welcome to the very first episode of the Synopsis, the crypto synopsis with Stokesy and Stoner. After the feedback we had recently, you guys who watched the interview, there was so much good feedback and comments. Myself and Stokesy thought we'd get together and try and do kind of a regular episode where we talk about crypto and some other things and kind of spitball and go over what's going on in the market, go over some of the latest news, and then follow up with a couple of coin picks. So Stokesy, welcome to the first episode, mate. Thanks for coming along.
Stoner, great to be here. This should be good fun.
It should be good fun. Guys, stick around, tune in. I think this will be a fun episode if it's nothing else. So stay tuned and let's get started. So guys, welcome back. Welcome back to episode 1 of the Stokesy and Stoner show. Stokesy, what's been going on, mate? What's happening in the world of crypto?
Stoner, I need to know about this Ethereum hack. So as you know, I'm a miner and I watched on all these crypto wallets, these Ethereum wallets that were hacked just through random guessing. Now, some of the numbers out there were huge. Like to guess an Ethereum private key, to get into those wallets, the number was like, the best analogy I heard was trying to find a single grain of sand on a single beach within a single planet within a single universe. So the odds are really low. However, as a miner, I started to think about the computation power of all my ASIC miners. Then I started to think about there's more than one Ethereum private key and wallet out there. Then I started to think about the pools of mining. And then I started to think, well, if we start looking at lots of grains on lots of beaches in lots of planets on lots of universes, what are the odds that we could actually see a compromise to all private keys through reshifting this mining power from doing transactions to guessing other keys?
Yeah, well, so what you're really referencing is what happened recently with here's an article here from CoinDesk. So an Ether thief found stealing funds with weak private keys. So just to lead into the article here, an unknown entity has been taking advantage of weak private keys to gather up tens of thousands of ETH, according to a new study. At one point, in January 2018, during last year's crypto price ramp, this amounted to nearly 38,000 ETH, an amount worth more than $54 million. Now, according to the report, the so-called blockchain bandit holds 44,744 ETH, or around about $6.1 million worth, in an address discovered amid a search for addresses that are protected by weak private keys. Now, here's another one from securitybrief.com.au, blockchain bandits brute forcing weak Ethereum private keys. Now, what I think this really stemmed from was, first of all, some people smart enough set up some algorithms where they would run random numbers, and then what they would do is they would sweep these numbers across wallets like my Ether wallet, for example. You got to think too, some of these online wallets have got APIs, right? So someone clever enough could set up some kind of automated software, essentially sweeping private keys based on these numbers automatically. You could have a bot doing this, and that's exactly what they did. So what they did is they were using really small numbers, because when Ethereum, like in its very earliest of days, launched, wallet software wasn't overly developed. There was people creating wallets that maybe didn't have the technical know-how at the time, and there wasn't the protections in place like there are at the moment to prevent weak private keys from being generated. So they've swept these addresses with these really weak private keys, and just an example, some of these private keys might have just been the number 15 or the number 20. You know, this is how kind of basic it got. And what they did to test this out, to test if it was still working, is some of these analysts that were doing this research, they deposited a little bit of Ethereum into these addresses, and instantly that ETH was swept out back into the master address. So it's pretty amazing, and just kind of shows, so, you know, you have, on one side, you have really intelligent developers building amazing tools, but you're still going to have very intelligent people looking to steal money.
So is this unique only to Ethereum? Like, what stops that same attack or counter attack on every single type of crypto? Why was it specifically Ethereum? That's the bit I couldn't get.
That's a good question, and actually, in the article itself that I read, I think it was one by Hacker Noon, they did say it did actually happen on Bitcoin as well. There were some weak private keys generated for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was also stolen, but not to the same degree as Ethereum. I guess when it comes down to could this apply to other protocols, you'd have to start doing some game theory and kind of probabilities based on at what point were these protocols developed, because many newer protocols are going to learn from the lessons of the previous protocols. Now, the standard for private key generation, now they use elliptic curve cryptography, so very complicated stuff, but essentially, like you were saying before, in terms of the probability of determining a private key numerically, now it's something in the order of 2 to the power of 256, which is incredible. So for people out
How
there,
many zeros is that?
oh man, it's a lot of zeros. And someone on Twitter actually said, am I safe using my Ether wallet? And I said, well, yeah, I use my Ether wallet. So I think for the most part, people don't have anything to worry about. Your Ethereum and your Bitcoin is not just going to be suddenly swept overnight. But it brings into question, I think, what will happen in the future in terms of mnemonic key generation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those words that you are either randomly given or that you come up with when you're generating a new private key, those words, the private key is generated from those words. Now, the reason this technology was actually implemented first on Bitcoin, and they did that because they realized that 256-bit strings of random numbers and letters would be very hard firstly for human beings to remember and articulate. So if we come up with some words that can offer the same matter of protection, people can remember these in their head without having to write them down, and then we can generate the private key from these words.
And that's what Andreas was talking about when we have these big movements of people in, worst case scenario, in war, and people have to go from one nation to another, or even one border to another, and you have economies or governments seizing their assets. You can't really remember a private key, but you can remember a string of words. And that's very powerful in the freedom of speech, in the sense that you can take your own money where you want to go by simply remembering those words. But as you were saying...
Oh, yeah, sorry. Episode 1, guys, bear with us. I thought you were going to say, so as you were saying, and then going from there. So what I think this shows is not anything for anyone to be worried about at the moment, but thinking ahead, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see people attempt to come up with random word generators in the future, and they'll cycle these random words and then generate private keys from those words and then try those. Probabilities is probably still the same, 2 to the power of 256, probably still impossible. But don't be surprised to see maybe rogue states using computing power, maybe from intelligence agencies, to try and run and match these, especially if you see Bitcoin going to the levels where many people with the conviction like I have think it's going to go to. The incentive is going to grow over time as the price of Bitcoin appreciates. What do you think about that?
Well, I was actually really worried about it, and I was actually looking forward to talking to you about this because, of course, we are the super minority at the moment. We're less than 1% of the first world population who even knows about crypto. People have heard about Bitcoin, but they don't actually understand about it. And when you hear something about people guessing, so if you're on the outside of this space and you hear, FUD, it's a negative FUD of going out there, not so much FUD that, hey, we've got to get into this because we're going to miss out on this bull run, but the real negative stuff of, hey, did you know that you can just simply run a computer-generated guessing game, which is, let's face it, effectively how you mine anyway, but you can reverse that and just guess these wallets. And, what was the number you gave? $54 million worth of Ether. Was that right? 54 million?
Yeah, I think it was around that.
Now, that's at today's rates. So think about that, prior, say mid 2017.
Yeah, sorry,
Or in
sorry to
in the
interrupt.
future,
The total value was 18.9 million, but that was
18.9
at the
million.
peak of Ethereum.
Right. So, but
Yeah.
in any case, all the people hear is millions of dollars being stolen on that blockchain, but or sort of through that guessing. But I was actually also thinking what you alluded to then. So you know that China and India, we'll probably talk about that in a minute, but these countries, these mega countries, these mega economies. So what I think the biggest economy is, of course, America, and China comes second. And in your video today, you mentioned India is coming up as the fifth largest economy in the world. Now, when you've got that much GDP, economic power, and sheer population, when you start shifting that power to the power of evil instead of the power of good, it's concerning for the whole space. But I guess at the end of the day, when there's a lot of information out there, and we were all sort of comforted by the fact that this doesn't compromise Ethereum itself. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Ethereum, but this is bigger than Ethereum. This is crypto versus traditional markets. So I'm happy to hear about the difficulty of guessing these keys, but still deep down, I'm just worried about these huge economic powers who could just simply take. Well, I hope I'm wrong, as you explained. I am kind of wrong, but if you just think of these massive mining pools, these huge mining pools that could be used for evil and not good, I'm confident though that the crypto space, it's like an arms race, isn't it? They come up with this counter attack, and then the crypto space beats it, and then it's this constant arms race of getting more and more secure. And the decentralization means that we're not having these attacks on one central body; we're having it on a decentralized network. So,
And what will happen in the future too, Adam, is if state powers decide to allocate computational resources to brute forcing private keys, the cost will be astronomical. And what they'll soon find is they're better placed to be mining Bitcoin. Mining Bitcoin will be far more profitable in the long run than sitting there trying to brute force private keys. And this is part of the brilliance of Bitcoin, and the way it's been designed is it has absolutely brilliant game theory built into basically every single aspect of it. Is it incentivizes good behavior and disincentivizes bad behavior. So at the same time as mining Bitcoin, these states mining Bitcoin and actually making money rather than spending money through just bleeding resources, they're actually making Bitcoin stronger at the exact same time. They're making the hash rate of Bitcoin higher and stronger as it goes. So, the likelihood of a 51% attack, which is obviously a different attack, becomes less and less over time as well. And, you follow some people and read some people who are seeing so far in the future that are saying, the hash war won't be a small niche private company hash war like it is today, but it'll be a state-based hash war in the future as countries begin to allocate resources to mining Bitcoin for their own federal reserves.
I remember in one of your videos, I can't remember how long ago it was, but you mentioned that if you stole crypto from a wallet, there's nowhere to put it. So you mentioned about, so I hack into somewhere, I steal crypto from whether it's an exchange or someone's wallet, and then the crypto community flags that crypto, that exchange, that transaction as being dodgy. Does that theory apply to this theft as well? So all that Ethereum that could have been stolen, can we just flag it and say, no, that's stolen Ethereum?
Absolutely. Those addresses likely already are blacklisted. So what I think will happen in the future is they'll end up being some kind of centralized body. It'll either be a regulated body through governments, or it'll just be some kind of body through the major exchanges, and they will share blacklists of addresses that no one should do business with. Now, there are still things like Wash where people can tumble Bitcoin through multiple addresses, but the blockchain analysis technology that's being developed by private firms is becoming very advanced. You have to understand, Bitcoin is still a triple ledger system. It doesn't matter how many times you wash it. It doesn't matter how many times you break that Bitcoin down. the systems being able to track that Bitcoin are getting smarter and smarter every day as well. And eventually they'll still be able to track that Bitcoin. So anything stemming from a certain address will just be completely blacklisted. And that's why many hacks that have taken place of ICOs, the funds haven't been spent because they can't spend them. Sure, they can give them to someone else, but you could just track that Ethereum, that Bitcoin from that address to this address, and you still say no one should accept that crypto.
Yeah.
So unless they can find an exchange that will accept this blacklisted Bitcoin, the exchange is then wearing the risk. If they take it, they're the ones wearing the risk, especially if they knew beforehand that crypto had been blacklisted.
Mate, speaking about bad exchanges and bad things in crypto, let's talk bloody Tether. Tether. So I released a video recently on Tether. In fact, I've released, in many of my market reviews, when I just quickly go down the list, I often jokingly say, I go down the list and I'm like, oh, Tether, we won't talk about Tether. But there's been 2 videos that I've had to make it. So a while ago, I released a video saying the top 3 crypto investments to avoid. And of those top 3, I was not talking about coins in specific. I was talking about centralized bodies. But the only coin I spoke about was, in fact, Tether. Now, in my opinion and others' opinions, and I've also watched your video on Tether, which you released, I think, in January last year, Tether was questionable from day one. So I, as not a crypto guy at the time, as just, I guess, an economist, which I'm not, but I just love economics. I'm like, well, how can that work? How can I take all of this money, put it into a box and not do anything with this money? I can't invest it in anything. I can't lend it against anything because that was not their terms. Their terms said, we're going to take this money, we're going to lock it in a figurative box, 1 for 1. And then, of course, as the crystal ball showed, not just from me, but from everyone who was in the questionable space in the space questioning Tether, it showed that they changed their terms and conditions. And then they kept printing this bloody imaginary money. And in my last video, I just, as a joke, I opened up a Word document and just wrote, I have $300 million. Bang. That was Tether. And essentially, in my opinion, that is Tether. When is this time bomb going to go bang?
Look, I think it's creeping up. It's creeping up, to, and how the bomb's going to go off and what is going to be contained within the bomb that comes out, who knows? But like I did in that video, over a year ago now, the connection between Bitfinex and Tether is well established through C-level executives being on both companies. They all
work in the same.
Yeah, you had interesting kind of non-disclosures happening where you would have both at Bitfinex and Tether, there was no faces behind the company. They were very careful about addresses and things like that. And in the crypto space at that time and even today, that's still questionable why you won't have a team behind it. Now, when you look at some of the things behind Bitfinex have been in trouble with regulators in the past. They've also suffered a series of attacks, one of which in 2016 they lost many millions of dollars, and instead of coughing up the funds for that themselves, they clipped all the users that held crypto on the exchange 30-something% to cover the cost for that. So, I think when you see the connection between the two and you see the questionable behavior and integrity of Bitfinex, even going back that far, I don't think it's looking real good.
Did you hear the theory about the entire bull run being triggered by Tether itself? So the theory was Tether were a few people, which is Bitfinex, because there's just people at the top. They printed all this imaginary money. They went and took this imaginary money and bought heaps of Bitcoin with it, which of course pumped up the volume and removed some of the supply because they were just basically taking all the Bitcoin out of the market. And there was a few videos out there where some analysts were saying, in fact, a huge portion of the bull run was actually created because of Tether itself. And then that goes on to the next part, which is really, terrifying for me when people actually start selling out of Bitcoin, which, let's face it, I don't think they actually will. But if they did, they'd actually discover that no money was actually ever put into this. It was all put into an imaginary Tether, and that Tether was put into Bitcoin. And so there was actually no money behind that. Have you heard that one?
Look, I have heard a little bit actually, and I'm not sure how much kind of credibility I'd give that theory, because if that were the case, then every exchange that has listed Tether would be in some way culpable for allowing that to happen. So all these exchanges, especially the top tier ones, do extensive due diligence, or they should, on the coins they accept.
Sure.
Now, you would think if they're seeing irregular volumes coming from Tether Bitcoin purchases all at the same time, that would be triggering red flags in the system. It'd be shut down pretty quickly. But there
What
were...
if that on-ramp, though, was on Bitfinex? So say the on-ramp is in Bitfinex. Bitfinex then transfers to other exchanges. Those other exchanges, how do they see the on-ramp of fiat currencies going in to back up that Tether?
Well, you would think that they would have access to records. I mean, surely they're not just going to take
that's the
Tether's
whole
word for
exposure,
it.
isn't it?
Hey?
Well, that's part of the whole controversy, that they did an audit. Tether did an audit, and they didn't use the big four. What's that? It's KPMG, Price Waterhouse Coopers, Deloitte, and what's the other big one? It'll come to me at 3:00 in the morning. So the market was saying, let's use one of those big four accounting firms, international powerhouses, and they didn't use those big four. They used one of their own audit teams, and the audit found that everything was good. But of course, that audit itself has been questionable, because it was like, hey, I got Jono out the back to do my audit for me, and Jono said it's all good, so it's all good. Whereas it had to be Price Waterhouse Coopers. Am I saying that right? Price Waterhouse Coopers.
Yeah. Look, I think you make a fair point, but remember, at the time, crypto was still highly controversial. You had many of these big accounting firms would have stakeholders with major banks, right? You had the CEO of JP Morgan calling Bitcoin a fraud and tulip mania. In Australia in January, the big four banks shut down access to people who were buying crypto from exchanges. They shut. So like it's not out of the question that Tether or Bitfinex wanted to use one of the big four, but knew that they either wouldn't have the work accepted, or if they did, it might have caused extra hassles for them, because the big four, Bitcoin and blockchain, was still just too in the crazy territory for them to touch. So,
but on that, if they're paying them, because it's just an audit body. So if I come to you and say, I make blue tubes for pens, and I'm a nobody, but I will pay you $100 million to audit me. I'm going crazy here. What do they care who I am? Whether I'm
it's about optics. It's about optics. So would one of these major four at that time, having accepted that job, would that be seen as a subtle endorsement of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I see.
It's all about optics, man. They would rather their perceptions stay within the narrative than take on a couple of $1 million, especially when these firms are massive, man. They're global.
It was Deloitte that pulled out of. Was it Deloitte pulled out of something? What did they pull out of? They pulled out of, I think, association with Tether, or something to do with Tether. That was one of the big four, and they've actually pulled back. I can't remember what coin it was. Have you seen anything about Deloitte pulling out of something?
No, I haven't. And this is the thing too, man. These major firms, they've got board members, they've got major shareholders, they've got people that are pulling strings that they need to appease, and they might just be sending directives: just don't touch this, don't touch it, not till we have an ETF approved, which is subtle endorsement from the United States government, from the SEC behind Bitcoin. That is going to be a major thing, just as a side note, in the future, is the approval of Bitcoin ETF. Right, it's no longer scam territory. It's like, okay, everyone can just relax now. Bitcoin's okay by the US government, so it's should be okay everyone else, but we know it's not in countries like
I was actually talking to Lark about that recently, though, but in fact just today by messaging. We were so dependent, somewhat not dependent, but looking forward so much to that ETF, which will still come. It'll come. But everyone was banking on this ETF, and it kept getting delayed and put off, and it's still not here. But it kind of doesn't matter now. I mean, when it does come, it'll be fantastic. It'll be Christmas, and no matter what's happening in the market, it'll just make it better. But Lark was saying that, we're developing so much and becoming so strong. The focus has now actually come off it. It's still in the background, and it'll be great when it comes. But it's reassuring to see how much development has gone ahead, how much companies have grown, and how much everything is moving forward. And the side thing on this, moving forward, did you hear the news about IOTA? Or IOTA, the token. So IOTA, the company, and IOTA, the token, linking it up to transport, so people can be paid for sharing information on the on-road transport industry, right down to there's a pothole right here. And IOTA was in a bad way for a while, but once the release of this information came out, it was just more good news for the industry. This links to AI, doesn't it?
IOTA does have something to do with AI and machine learning. I think it's more so machine to machine comms,
Mm.
and the coin will essentially act as payment between machines. So push and pull requests for data might actually have a small value attached to it in the form of a piece of the token.
Have you got any?
No,
Yeah,
no. I wasn't. I saw some questionable stuff behind IOTA a while ago, and I stayed away from it. I didn't like the fact that the major guy behind the team was a bit aggressive, and those kind of things a bit troublesome for me with centralized coins like that. So
yeah, a bit like BSV. I love saying BSV. I mean,
no
I hate
comment.
everything about it, but it's just, I wonder if they realised when they actually made it, BSV, it's just, but I digress. Anyway, what do you reckon about this bloody India thing? So I watched your, sorry, I didn't mean any disrespect to India, you're good people. I'm just talking about the delinking of people's freedom to access their money. So you mentioned in this video that this hyperinflation, just as we've seen in African nations, there was it Zimbabwe where they just took the note and just basically cut the last three zeros off the note to try and say, right, this is how we've stemmed inflation, by getting rid of those last three zeros. I think you mentioned in your video, CPI was through the roof with a annual inflation of what, 7.5% for 50 years
on average. Yeah,
mate, that's just nuts.
yeah. So
I'm worried India's pushing themselves out of the global market.
yeah, well, when you have inflation figures that are so bad and you don't have wages that are matching inflation, which is nearly impossible to do, people are going to struggle. So inflation is a terrible form of control, if you want to phrase it that way, or if you want to go down that path. But inflation can really cripple a country because money you can't save. No bank would be matching that level of inflation as an interest rate. So even if you were getting 7.5% interest on your money, you're making nothing because the value of your money is going down by 7.14% per year. And it's very hard to plan financially when you don't know what inflation is going to be like every day to the next. You need stability. You need projections. You need to know if your money is going to be safe and it's going to retain its value. So from a psychological perspective for the Indian population, not just on more of a macro perspective on just everyday spending, this would be very, very hard on the Indian people. And the fact that the central bank is coming out so hard against Bitcoin tells me one thing, is that they know what is going on in South American countries with people flocking to it that are experiencing the same thing.
That's right.
They suspect there could be some teething issues in the global economy, maybe soon, maybe not. Lots of rumours of it. And they do not want to lose control. And they also know that in many of these developing countries, many people have mobile devices. That's their one connectivity to the world. You're seeing YouTube explode in India as the internet is becoming more readily accessible, more people are getting access to phones. So what goes hand in hand with that? Well, it's Bitcoin. So I suspect this is a preemptive move because they see it as a huge threat.
Yeah, and it is actually the good people of India that suffer from everything. Again, it's a centralized body. They start saying you can't use this, but it goes back to the language of money. If you and I come to an agreement that an apple is a form of money, then it's a form of money. And if we come to an agreement that, well, as we know, the first form of digital money was experienced again in an African nation where they started trading minutes to your mobile phone. So you had, say, I buy credit for my phone and I've got 30 minutes of talk time, and I go to the shop and say, Bo, I want to buy a loaf of bread, and you say, well, I'll take 10 minutes worth of talk time, and bang, it was on. That was a currency. And whether they whether the nation liked it or not, people were using minutes for their phone to to trade as a medium of exchange, and it was quite fungible as well. It was fungible because you could text these minutes to each other. But what I also heard of a crazy well, not crazy, it's well, crazy by my standards and probably by our standards in the first world. What they're doing to get out of this inflation, this effective inflation, is some people were buying washing machines and dryers and mothballing. So imagine going down to the shop, you buy a dryer or a washing machine, you take it home, you wrap it up in Glad wrap or just leave it in the box. And that was a way of protecting your money. And they interviewed this poor Venezuelan dude, and they're like, well, what are you doing? And he goes, someone's going to need a washing machine in a year. I can't put it into cars. I can't put it into this. This is possibly a rare commodity. And before you knew it, you had people avoiding inflation by buying white goods, of all things.
Yeah, there's an amazing article of a journalist, a Venezuelan journalist, that talks about how Bitcoin has saved his life and his family's life. So using localbitcoins.com, they're allowed to buy $50 of Bitcoin a day. If they go over $50, then it's flagged by the bank and they can have their accounts shut down. They buy $50 a day.
Bitcoin, like, is it centralized or paper wallets or
peer-to-peer? So local Bitcoins facilitates people to do peer-to-peer trades. So I think local Bitcoins acts as an escrow.
So how do they get on the on-ramp? Like, where do they go literally to the bank, give them $50?
Or they'll send the money from their bank account. I think they can still do it online or in person, and they'll send it to a bank account address with local Bitcoins, and then local Bitcoins acts as, I believe, I could be wrong, but acts as the escrow. And then once that money's received, we'll release the Bitcoin to the person that bought it.
Cool.
And then the cash will go to the other person that sold it.
Not forcing them to go through a central exchange and keep it on someone's exchange.
It's not so much it kind of is an exchange because it is exchanging, but I think they have measures in place to keep it as decentralized as possible. But this is the only way they can get Bitcoin because they don't have exchanges in Venezuela. So this guy that bought some Bitcoin, instead of just keeping his money in bolivars, which were going down, and I believe might even still be by like 50% a week, Bitcoin at that time was remaining fairly stable. And if they had bought Bitcoin from the start of the year up to now, you're seeing 20% plus gains. So these guys are making money by putting their cash into a hard sound alternative rather than keeping it in the bolivar.
David Hay was doing work over there to use Dash as the cryptocurrency. I actually haven't heard much about that ever since, and it was a real shame because David Hay put a lot of work up during the bull run, and the poor Venezuelan people were trying to get out of this, hyperinflation of their own currency, and then a lot of them got onto Dash, and then of course we had this big crash, and the poor Venezuelan people were like, it doesn't matter where we put our money. This was, at the end of 2017, beginning of 2018. No matter where they put their money, it was crashing. But even some people were saying, well, they had kind of accepted that all money is experiencing hyperinflation or inflation. And many were happy because Dash was experiencing far less inflation than their own currency. But from what you've seen in the crypto space, is Dash still going on over there? And where's David Hay gone?
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure what's going on with Dash. And look, I think what will happen is people are going to naturally, like, there are good alternatives that people can use other cryptos, but what's going to happen is people are going to naturally go to Bitcoin because of its hardness, its soundness, its decentralization, and its censorship resistance.
And with the Lightning Network on top of that, it's going to make it...
Yeah, man. Like, a Lightning Network is, for anyone that has used it will know, it is stupidly good. It is incredible. I donated $5 to someone the other day using a Lightning payment, and it was within a second that payment was...
Is there a limit to get that quick? So say I want to give you $1 million. It's not happening, brother. But if I wanted to give you $1 million... Could I do it on the Lightning Network, or is there a limit on there?
Look, I believe so. Maybe there are limits at the moment with wallet software, maybe because it is still in testing. Maybe the wallet software won't let you deposit that much, but I don't see why in the future you wouldn't be able to. But what will happen is the Bitcoin network will be used for major transactions as a settlement network. So Bitcoin fees will go up over time, but because of the security, the longevity, of the Bitcoin network, it will be used for major settlements. So for $1 million, people are going to want to see proof on the Bitcoin blockchain. So it'll be used for major international payments as well. And this is the amazing thing. We can get into like foreign currencies, exchange rates, and how they just kill global industry, and how Bitcoin can overcome these kind of things. And you know, how are you going to see these different scenarios play out with Lightning Network being like a retail payment, micropayments in apps, and you're going to see the Bitcoin blockchain being used for major settlements and international trade. It's crazy times, but that's definitely a few episodes away, I think.
Just before we wrap up, I meant to ask you, you know how Litecoin has longer blocks? If you, oh sorry, that's Bitcoin Cash, but Litecoin goes faster. Correct. And uses less energy in their algorithms. If I had Bitcoin on the Lightning Network and Litecoin on the Lightning Network, would Litecoin be quicker on the same Lightning?
Because no, I don't think so. No, because
okay, so it doesn't matter what coin it is.
No, because Lightning Network is a layer 2. It's a layer 2 system. It's a layer 2 protocol. It's like its own protocol, right? So you have the base blockchain. This could be Litecoin. This could be BSV, BCH, whatever. Lightning Network sits on top of that. So the money comes out of the base blockchain into a smart contract and becomes like pegged to the top chain that holds it, and then this will distribute the equivalent amount of that coin onto that layer 2 network, and then it's sitting in this layer 2 network. So all those movements are in accordance with the speed developed by this protocol.
Well, in olden day terms, is it fair to say that layer 2 is kind of like an escrow? In the sense that it holds it in there and then just releases it quickly. And that's why I was asking about, is there a limit? Because if it were like an escrow, you need a certain amount of money in there to release it. Now, excuse my ignorance on these questions, but
No. Look, it's probably even pushing my my technical knowledge of Lightning Network in terms of referring to the way it functions in a particular like mannerism or word such as escrow. I probably couldn't quite answer that. But essentially the way it works is it works on time lock contracts. So, and these payments channels, once you have these secure payments channels set up between two nodes, then payments can be sent between those two nodes. But in terms of when the Bitcoin gets sent into the Lightning Bitcoin contract, it gets locked in the contract, and then the contract will distribute the equivalent amount of that coin, but the original coin stays in the contract, so you don't have any duplication or it's the equivalent value, right? It's the equivalent value being distributed. So you have Bitcoin, then you have Lightning Bitcoin. That's why people say Lightning Bitcoin's not Bitcoin. That's their argument, is that it's a different coin, so it's not Bitcoin.
But without that Bitcoin as the base, you can't get it into the Lightning.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it is Bitcoin. Yeah.
So, mate, do you have any... We're going to look at a coin. We're going to look at a specific coin to finish this episode off. Do you have anything anything you've been exploring that might look like a good pick, or anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I've actually been worried about Cardano and Skycoin. So there's been... I did a long review on Skycoin. I'm not sure if you've seen it. And there's been this argument or conflict with John McAfee and Skycoin. So Skycoin's been going for about 8 years. The creators got into it when Bitcoin first came out. They were into the blockchain space very early in the piece. For the first few years, they didn't get any external investment. They didn't plug it real vocally throughout the crypto community, but now there's been a shift. Now all this development is starting to come together, and they've actually started to put money into the promotion of it. And I'm actually traveling to Melbourne in June to go to a Skycoin information thing. I don't know, it's actually during the day on a Sunday, and I'm going to fly down to Melbourne and check it out there and hopefully interview a few people there. But I've heard that because Skycoin can do so much, it may be, and this is a big call, it may be an Ethereum killer and a Cardano killer. Now, Cardano is huge, and everyone loves Cardano. I think anyone who's in the space loves Cardano. But I've heard an argument that Skycoin could be so effective throughout everything it does and the way it interacts in so many different platforms that Cardano could be in trouble. What do you reckon?
Look, I don't know enough about Skycoin to really comment, but what I will say, just from I guess a fundamental perspective, is I think platforms that try and do too many things may find themselves masters of none. crypto and blockchain architectures are very complicated. Very complicated. Even today, extremely hard to develop. So knowing that, if a protocol is claiming to do a lot of things very well and to be this and that killer, I would need to see proof in the pudding to believe that, because if you watch the interview between myself and Charles Hoskinson and you know a bit about Cardano, you know just how long it's taken for them to develop their protocol, even to get to the point of being able to launch dApps and having their governance system set up.
How old is Cardano?
How old?
Yeah.
Oh, at least 3, maybe 4 years old. I think they had their ICO in.
So they're 8 years old.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm the first to say I know I don't know, but I just know that when I released the Skycoin video the first time, it got like 20,000 hits. It's been one of my biggest videos. It was massive.
Yeah, well, John McAfee's got a big Skycoin tattoo on his back, doesn't he?
And then they had a fight, and now he's got this bloody tattoo on his back.
Yeah, right.
So, so John McAfee, he did all this work with them, and he was walking around with his Skycoin miner. Wherever he went, he had a Skycoin miner under his arm. And then there was conflict between him and the Skycoin team. And they broke up, if you will. And now he's got a tattoo on his body for the rest of his life.
And it's so big, it's like his whole back, pretty much.
Blue. And
it's blue.
Tattoos, but apparently if you want to get tattoos off, colours are the hardest to get out. Like blue is not a good color to try and get out. So
wow.
That's tragic. How about you, mate? What coins have you been looking at?
Well, look, the coin I want to just bring, I guess, to people's attention is Basic Attention, BAT.
Yeah, a lot of talk about that.
Now, you can see that these guys have actually had quite a good increase in value since late 2018. There's just a few things I'm noticing which I think are quite attractive for this coin at the moment. Now, first of all, you can see it's ranked 22 in terms of total market cap. So this is a utility token that is doing extremely well, and for the most part is under the radar. I would say their hype factor is very low. When you look at the liquidity of the token, it has amazing liquidity. It is on 100. It has 100 trading pairs across a number of exchanges on all the big ones: Binance, Coinbean, Coinbase Pro, LA Token, Upbit, you name it, they're on it. So from a liquidity risk perspective, that's very good. Now, the thing that is really starting to play out with utility tokens is the users of the application, right? So I think Binance quite clearly is having the success it's having in terms of its token appreciation because of the volume of users using the platform, holding the token, using the token. You are seeing naturally demand go up as people buy it and just hold it and don't use it. So we're seeing users are having a correlation to a token's appreciation. Now, the way the Brave token works is you've got the user, the advertiser, and the publisher. These are kind of like the three main stakeholders. Now, in terms of the application, the browser itself, it's now had over 20 million downloads. So that is pretty incredible. 20 million downloads, and is starting to grow more and more and more. Now, you've got some verified publishers such as The Guardian and The Washington Post are two publishers that have actually signed up for Brave. So that is a lot of weight getting behind this platform, and it's a lot of users. And having personally used this browser now for probably 6 months, I wouldn't go to anything else. I mean, my only gripe with it is you'll find some features and functions on websites don't work because the built-in tracking blocker just blocks absolutely everything. But I think if Brave continues on the trajectory that it is on, I think it is one to keep an eye out on and one to watch. What are your thoughts, Adam?
Mate, that is, to me, I don't know why I think about Tron, even though they're completely different ends of the spectrum, except in the feel for it. So when I'm looking at coins and how people talk about it, there seems to be a really strong batting team for BAT. That's a bad joke. So people love to bat for BAT. And there's also this other divide that seems to be quite against it. And I don't know why I bring up Tron, just because there seems to be this huge divide in it. But I bought BAT a while ago, not through knowledge, but just through sheer hedging my bets. And I'm glad I did, because the development and adoption of this token and its utility is something that I think we're going to see some really good gains in this coin. So not only in its utility in the crypto space and in the market, but if you're just simply investing and trading, I think this is like I almost see it like a blue chip share, if you will. It looks like it's going to have some real good backing to it. Have you got vision to the supply there? What's the supply of the coin?
Yeah, so and this was another thing actually that I thought was quite attractive. Out of the circulating supply, there's 1.25 billion, and the total supply is 1.5. So you're
Yeah, that's right.
talking
Yeah.
about 80% are currently
Already
out there in circulation, which is
That's right.
again very good from a risk perspective.
And you know what? That makes me think that perhaps some of the negative hype is, in fact, just competitors just pumping it out there as negative hype. Because, let's face it, with markets being so small, you can actually put, if you want to, you can put negative hype out there to literally manipulate prices of coins. It'll stabilize. The best analogy I heard was, again, from Andreas, is that if you look at any coin like a ship versus, so the traditional markets, you have a big cargo ship and it's on the ocean. And when a wave hits that cargo ship, nothing really happens. So it could be a 4 meter wave hits a cargo ship, which is a traditional market, and it doesn't move that much. It might move a few percent over a year. But then you go to the other end of the spectrum of crypto, and it becomes a little fishing boat. So the same wave will hit it. It's still a 3 to 5 meter swell hitting it, but that little boat will go all the way up and all the way down, and that's the volatility. But as these little fishing boats grow, so to speak, and they get bigger into those cargo ships, the waves that hit these coins and these markets, the movement becomes a lot less. And I think you can see that in all the coins, the big movements in Bitcoin and any coin, including BAT itself, that movement starts to become less and less. The volatility essentially drops as these markets become bigger and more stable. And I actually look forward to still catching some of those waves with the altcoins and riding those waves up and getting hopefully some good returns. But equally, I look forward to the stability of the parent coins such as Bitcoin to get more confidence in the markets. And we won't have to deal with the constant negativity of, it's so volatile, it's so volatile.
That's a good analogy you use there with the child coin. Actually, I talk about correlations to Bitcoin a lot and how strongly the whole market is correlated. That's a good way to put it for maybe people that are maybe less technically minded, is to think of Bitcoin as the parent and the other coins as the child. The child is generally always going to follow the parent most of the time, or 80% of the time we'd hope, and 20% of the time not. So I think that's probably a good one to end it on, Adam, mate. We've gone for 47 minutes, not a bad effort for the first episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Synopsis with Stokesy and Stoner. I had a lot of fun, guys, because this will be on both our channels, but it's on my channel. I'm recording my channel. Be sure to go and follow Adam. The link to his channel is down in the description below. Real easy, just description, click it down, click the link, go and subscribe to Adam. Adam, what are your closing words?
Thank you again for the opportunity, my friend. This is good fun. I just have one quick question. Every time I see you, you're in a different location. How many places do you shoot?
Generally, it's always between the office and other places, but I'm actually at home at the moment. I was planning on doing an episode on this soon. The lease is up very shortly on my office. I've decided to end the lease. It's been an interesting journey. I want to do an episode on that soon and just share some of that journey with people and tell them, what it was like from my perspective. Hey?
You're an altcoin. You're really unstable at the moment.
Very unstable, mate. Very unstable. But
hang in there, brother.
Yeah, I've got the stability of being back home at the moment. So, yeah, no, it's good, mate.
Mate, good working with you. Thanks for the opportunity again.
No worries, Stokesy, guys. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you in episode 2. Peace out.
Next time.